Welcome to Jargon, a podcast bringing clarity to commonly misunderstood business concepts. We're debunking and simplifying the buzzwords and ideas plaguing today's business world and offering a fresh perspective on these topics.
All right, welcome to another episode of Jargon. This is Bill Aimone here. I've got Todd Boutte in here with me, our technology practice leader. We're going to talk about implementing and prioritizing AI use cases in corporations. I think AI has become really popular lately, and people are talking about it. And we're starting to see leadership and organizations ask their people to come up with ways they can improve the business using AI.
Yeah, that's right, Bill. And good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's going to be a driving force behind business decisions, whether people get guidance from outside or follow any sort of methodology or not. So today we wanted to talk about put some structure around that, right?
Yeah, and I have a structured process for implementing AI. So just to level set here, we're talking about organizations who are complex, have a lot of moving parts, and they look at AI as an opportunity to improve the business, but they don't know where to start. Or they've started in more of a wild buckshot type approach where they're just trying different things and seeing what works. And that's not bad, but there needs to be an organized process so the organization is not going crazy trying to put AI in all over the place and then putting the business at risk. And so you need to be careful when jumping into AI to make sure you're not putting the company at risk, but then you're also not spending money where you don't need to. Part of what we're working with our clients on is putting an organized and thoughtful process around their AI transformation strategy and how they actually can execute and build something they can execute upon and show value for.
Yeah, it's the current state for most companies is a pretty fractured use of AI at this point. There's the people that are kind of high tech, they like this stuff, they go dabble, they go experiment, but they're probably not following the right kind of guidelines for their own company's data protection or data policies, right? And then there's other folks who think AI is coming to get their job, so they don't want to have anything to do with it. So this methodology we're going to talk about tries to bring everybody together around the same set of goals and align with company values and company policy to really accomplish something useful with AI.
Yeah, and I think the other third component too is a lot of companies are getting sold a bad bill of goods when it comes to AI. Maybe a enterprise software provider is coming to them saying, "Hey, we've got AI embedded in our software." And really, it's just another computer program they've written. Really, it's not true AI, and they find themselves disappointed with the answer. And frankly, a lot of the enterprise software companies are not quite there yet. They're getting there, but they're not quite there yet with their AI capabilities. So what's happening is right now there's OpenAI, there's Gemini, Anthropic, and all these other platforms that you can build upon, but it requires fine tuning. It requires a lot of custom I don't want to use the word custom development, but custom building of the AI solution that's going to be helpful for your company. So we start thinking about it. A lot of companies have created contests. Hey, everybody come up with your AI ideas. And I honestly can't think of a worse thing to do. Ask an organization to come up with ideas for AI. It reminds me back when they had these quality circles back in the day where everybody put their ideas in a bin. And then at the end of the month, we meet and go over ideas. And I remember very distinctly early in my career, one of the ideas was we need a new paper cutter in the accounts payable department. And we said, why do you need a new paper cutter? I said, well, the old one's dull and it doesn't cut the paper well. I said, well, why are you cutting paper? Well, because the printer is printing the paper too wide and we can't fit it in the tubes to send to manufacturing for them to sign. Well, why are you putting them in the tubes for manufacturing to sign? I don't know. Well, stop doing that. We don't need a paper cutter. So when we start thinking about AI use cases and prioritizing them and build that funnel, you've got to ask the whys. Why? Someone comes with an idea and says, hey, I need AI to do something for me. And it's just putting a Band-Aid on an inefficient process. We need to stay away from those things, but focus on the high value cases where it adds value, but it's not too big where it's a long project that never gets anywhere. You've got to break it down into bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, perfect. And that's where we're going to start. Like the reference point for today's conversation is an article that we put out a couple days ago, right? And the idea here is surface high value, actionable items around AI. Not have a big suggestion box that sits and like you said, people throw in any random idea they can come up with. We're going to put some boundaries around this, put some time frames around it, and surface those really high value use cases. That's definitely the idea.
Exactly. So part of what we encourage and we're working with our clients on is bringing cross-functional teams together in a collaborative environment to brainstorm where AI might be applicable. And it's not just doing AI for AI's sake, but it's where can we gain competitive advantage? Where can our clients get some efficiencies? Where can they get some quick wins along the way and prove it out? Part of that is we do kind of these 2-day sprints with our clients. We call them our ACE workshops, where ACE gets idea generation. So coming up with prioritized use cases cross-functionally and challenging each other and using the expertise the internal expertise of the company and understanding the full process, but then also bringing in leading practices around AI, what's working, what's not, what's happening, what are the trends. People keep talking about AI agents, or they'll talk about the next level of AGI. We're not quite there yet. And we need to be smart about how we attack AI and do it in a very methodical way. So that's the first step, getting cross-functional teams together in a collaborative environment and build out the ideas for the use cases using kind of a sprint type methodology as opposed to researching and pontificating for weeks on end.
Personally, I love these sessions because this is the first chance some folks have had to just ask questions, to talk about what's plausible or implausible, or come up with pie in the sky ideas, or talk about bottlenecks, and let somebody from a different department hear that. And then they go, oh, well, this is how we deal with that. Or, we keep 10 people working on this problem. How do you guys do it with only one, right? These are how we bubble up ideas in a lot of circumstances, not just around AI. This methodology, works in a variety of use cases. But focusing on what's plausible, what's accomplishable, what can have some boundaries around it with the resources we have on hand, and then really tying those things to business cases, business needs, things that are going to deliver value quickly. Right?
Yeah, and part of where we start is really understanding what are the challenges the company's having today? What are the big inefficiencies in the company? What are the big headaches? It's really, what problems do we need to solve today? And if you have enough people in the room talking about it, you're going to surface some headaches that are in the organization, be it the amount of research and engineering department might need to do to put together a proposal, or the specifications that are required to put together a manufacturing specification document, or just anything around any type of analytic research they're trying to do and get their numbers out of for production planning purposes or staff planning purposes. What are the big drivers of issues, and really identifying what those are? And then what are if they were to approve them, what are the benefits they get out of them? We had a company bring up some ideas around, well, we spent an extra amount of time putting together specification documents, but reality was the amount of time they were spending, it was a pain in the neck, but it wasn't enough time to justify building out a AI engine around that. And there were just some quick things they could do with AI easily. But really, what are those impactful opportunities, and prioritizing those?
Yeah, and so before we get too far afield from our methodology conversation, you mentioned ACE before. Why don't we clarify that for our listeners?
Yeah, so we call it accelerate, collaborate, and execute. So it's all around accelerating the idea creation process and using it in a collaborative way, and then building points of execution. So what are we going to deliver on? So building out those use cases quickly and thoughtfully with a good business case behind it, and making them actionable with an actionable path forward. Okay, in 2 months, we're going to have this prototype out, and this is our expected benefits. This is our measurable results, and this is what we want to do. So those are called our sprints that we go through with our clients.
Right. So out of that accelerate phase, what do you think is a good benchmark for the accomplishments in that phase of this? If we were going to, I don't know.
Well, I hate using the word phase. It's really coming up with some crunchy use cases that are meaningful to the organization. The organization can get behind, not just one department, but the organization as a whole understands that it's of value, maybe not just for every department, but for maybe a subset of the organization, but it's going to drive value, be it in engineering, production, service delivery, project management, whatever it might be. There are things that people can get behind and they understand, and there's some actionable use cases.
Right. So we really want to leave that before we move into this collaboration phase with some buy-in, right? We want everybody sort of rallied around these are things that we can accomplish. We're going to go now decode what is the exact problem, what's the business case for this, what's it going to cost, who's involved. We've got some buzz around these things.
Exactly. And then part of that is identifying the benefits, identifying the risks associated with that, and the resources that are needed. So the benefits are typically I say relatively easy to do, but to say, look, we expect to improve, production rates. We expect to improve service delivery. We expect to maybe it's reduce headcount. Who knows? It could be any type of metric that we expect to get a benefit out of. And then the other piece of it is the risk piece of it. How are we going to address privacy and security and data? And we did a podcast last week on data privacy and AI, and how do we minimize the risk and make sure we are not exposing information out there and how do we secure it and make sure AI models we build are secure? You hear a lot of people pulling models into their own environment and moving off of a software as a service model. There are also, for example, OpenAI has their enterprise edition where you can, they're SOC 2 compliant and they have privacy with their data. But then there's other tools. Invariably, you're going to have to use other tools to fine tune your AI models. And when you start driving to those other tools, like a Llama or one of those other tools, you're again another risk exposure. So how do we maintain that privacy? Do we pull the models onto our own servers and keep them in-house? How do we balance that and make sure we have the capacity? And then we're also not building a model that's just not going to work. I mean, it's got to work and it's got to be reliable. So understanding that. Now, the other big piece when we start prioritizing these use cases and collaborating on them, is it something that's repeatable? Can I take that model and apply it to other places in the organization? So maybe it's not just for a specific engineering use case, but it can be used in quality. It could be used in another department or another function. So it's extendable and it's repeatable. So that way, when you build these repeatable models, you can reuse them inside the company and it can fit multiple purposes.
Yeah, and extract even more value out of it, which is perfect. And so, one of the risks that we love to make sure that companies pay attention to is this resource risk, right? The idea that you can't leave your brainstorming session, put these charters on paper and just think they're going to take care of themselves. So how do we help companies sort of execute on these things? What are the tools that we use to help them actually follow through?
Yeah, so there's multiple things. One is not just looking at the technology that's required and the tools that are required, and what does it take to implement those tools and integrate them and use them? What APIs are needed? What connectivity and data is needed inside the company to be able to extract and build the models on? There's also the governance process for managing the project, for making sure we're acting on it and getting it done. Again, with any project, it's all about good planning. So you think about these use cases, plan out, okay, here are the steps, here are the resources, here are the dependencies. So understanding what are the dependencies, what are the unknowns, because in some of these cases, you're stepping into an unknown. You're building out a use case that nobody else has done before. What are the unknowns? How are we going to manage those risks and building a process around managing that? And a lot of mature organizations have that process in place for managing projects and initiatives and prioritizing them, of applying those steps and how they work and how they get things done to these use cases for AI. So don't do it in a bubble. Leverage what you have, the capabilities you already have in your organization around managing your programs, but then having program management mentality around managing the use cases to make sure they're getting done, holding people accountable, and being collaborative about how you're problem solving along the way.
Right, and test and train and keep getting buy-in from your peers. It's very collaborative, right? And that's why the C in ACE is collaborate, right? None of this stuff gets done without people. And then especially in that execution phase. And we're trying to compress things that might percolate in the background for months or years into something when you have a plan, you follow a methodology you can accomplish in weeks or months and start extracting value from it soon, right?
Yeah, and the part of that execution piece too is build the use cases where you get some small wins along the way, because the model development process can test your patience. And you're running a model and you're not sure if it's working or how well it's working, and it's running for 12 hours. You don't know, did you apply the right amount of computer capacity? Is there something wrong with the model? Did you overbuild it, underbuild it? Having some wins along the way so you're not just staring at a screen all day waiting for the model to be fine-tuned and work. Put out some small bits and wins within the use case. So the use case might be a broader one that enables a series of shop floor automations, but are there some specific steps that it can help put some intelligence around and automate, planning and forecasting of your production, or whether it's producing bill of materials and training materials for new products, whatever it might be, put put some wins along the way in there so you get some execution. People don't give up and go, oh, is AI stuff? Yeah, right. You need to build some use cases that are quick things that people can see, touch, and learn from. And learn from the process of building and deploying those. Last thing you want to do is overcommit to a use case and you find out halfway through it's just not feasible, or something's changed in your company and the environment. You didn't need it after all.
Right. And, to put a finer point on something like that, it might be explicitly a pilot program. Might that be a viable way to do this? Say, if there's a department that is particularly keen on being a champion internally for something like this, would that be something you might leverage to kind of build buzz with a smaller pilot program?
Yeah. And one of our clients, they're starting with a very small pilot, very specific application with a very specific type of project that they're doing for a very specific client industry they're working with, where they're having to do fast turnaround. And so they're using that as let's build that out. Let's have something that we can get rolled out in a couple of weeks and usable and prove it out. Part of that is there's a lot of reusability within that model that they can apply to other places, but at least prove it out, whether it's visual recognition of bids that come in from a government entity that's asking for information, or a large corporation for a big project, or whatever it might be, or specs for a production unit or something like that. They're able to pick some specific use cases that they can apply and start using. So this is not a, hey, roll it out, the traditional waterfall approach. We're going to do everything and kind of roll it out like a big ERP project. This is a small, one piece at a time, agile approach. And people need to also think about, how does this AI impact their entire digital ecosystem? And I know that sounds kind of grandiose, but start thinking about, what are the things that are going on in the company that you have capabilities around that can be replaced? And I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about technology. And so as AI evolves, the dependence on your ERP or CRM systems and the like, you've got to be aware of that and know that that has an impact on that as well. And the constraints they're putting on it too.
Right. So what other pieces might you recommend kind of in the organizational structure to deal with the adjustment to incoming AI? Some companies have pretty evolved technology steering committees, some don't. Are you looking for an internal champion to kind of keep up with things? What's your recommendation?
I'm not recommending creating new positions in your company specifically for that, but there needs to be a steering committee of sorts, whether you have a technology steering committee or if there's I'll call it innovation steering committee. Some of our companies that are in the technology sector, they have a innovation group that's basically focused on innovation and rapid prototyping, and they're accustomed to rolling out new things embedded in that process. Now, if your organization has nothing and you don't have a technology steering committee and you don't have program management capabilities or innovation group, then really you need to create one to manage this and keep it under control. And it needs to involve technology, of course, but it needs to involve your controller, for example, who's concerned with controls in your environment because you're exposing data. And how do I make sure I've got the right controls in place? It needs to include people from human resources that are dealing with the people and the change management aspect. It needs to include your operational people, of course, because they're driving the business, sales and marketing. They're thinking competitively, what are we doing out there in the market? What information are we pulling in? What are we exposing? What are we not exposing? And how do we maintain competitive advantage while keeping our data private and our proprietary information private as well?
Absolutely. Well, look, you can expect much more from Trendy on these topics around AI. This is front of mind for a lot of our clients, and we're going to hear more stories about every quarterly board meeting where AI comes out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's happening right now. After the holidays, the board members have heard all about AI from their family holiday chats, and they're asking their executive leadership to come up with what are we doing about it? And the only cautions I put, don't do it just for AI's sake, but do it because it adds value and it's going to provide benefit to the company. There are fabulous use cases out there and opportunities. Just do it smart. You don't want to look back and you've got a minefield full of stuff you've cobbled together and nobody's really collaborated on it. So it's really about collaboration across the organization, building momentum and driving towards an executable plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're building a hub around this information as well. So if any of our listeners want to check this out or pass this on to other folks, it's Trenergy.ai. We're keeping our handbook up to date there, all our articles, all our podcasts. This should be a go-to place to kind of keep up on the industry.
Yeah, and our AI handbook's a free resource for anyone to download, use as a guide as you go through this transformation effort. And we thank you for listening.
We'll do it again soon.